So what we can do here is use the chat to just put your number in the chat on what you would put down for your score on a scale of 0 to 10. If 10 is that you're completely in stride, thriving, feeling very, very energized by how you're operating, and a 1 out of 10 is you can hardly, you can hardly get it together in terms of getting out of bed and getting motivated, and you just know you need to make a change. What's the number that comes up for you? So I suppose if it's your birthday, you're allowed to be a 10, right, Ellen? Happy birthday, Ellen. It's Ellen's birthday today. Happy 30th. Hope you're out partying somewhere today. All right, so we've got, some good scores here. Some 10s, or a 10, I should say. Greg, 9.75, something's missing there. Obviously just a whisker.
No, that's just me showing off that's how old I am today. The 0.5 points, the 7.5 point.
Yeah, there's some high scores here. So I'd probably put in one for myself too, actually. So for those who, I can see some people have since joined and it's maybe new to you, this is a very valuable exercise to do in a team. In fact, it's one of our first protocols that we recommend to a team to help keep not just ID alive, but not just the language of ID, but the principles of ID. At the end of the day, what ID is all about is helping you understand yourself so you can operate to the full effect of yourself by being in stride and true to this authentic, natural makeup that you have. And so this is just an awesome check-in to do. It's particularly valued by leaders to get a pulse on where their team is at. So you can sort of go, okay, we've got, everyone up. Maybe it's, there's a few outliers, either up or down. Maybe the average of the team. Well, what I can tell you is it pretty much reflects the performance of the team. Like, you can't have a high performance team if everyone's out of stride. Having said that, just because you've got everyone in stride doesn't mean it's automatically a high performance team. That'd be like saying you've got a basketball team of stars. Everyone's great basketball players, but if they don't have a basketball game strategy, that's not necessarily going to mean that they win, right? So it's not all you need, but you're more likely to be a great basketball team if you've got some great players, like really good skills people in stride. So that you've got to start there. The average score when we do this, and not just around the world, but when we do this in most teams that we start with, the average score is 6.3. And then within a couple of months of helping people understand themselves, how to operate more in stride, and understand each other so they know how to banter back and forth with each other and work more effectively together, the aim is to get the score to be in the 8s. And when you have a team operating at that level, so when you look at what we've got today on this group, if we were a team, we've got great ingredients for success because the scores are really quite high. And that is often the case in our masterclass, because I guess there's a lot of people here that are not only very self-aware, but they've been doing a lot in terms of their awareness to get themselves increasingly in stride and consistently so. So these scores, I guess that's a longer way of saying the scores you see in this class are not indicative of, what you see typically in other teams, right? But as you work with teams that are high performance, you can expect to see this. There's a team that I'm working consistently with right now, and I'm seeing these sorts of scores when we do our check-ins, and you can see it in the dialogue and the speed with which we're starting to get things done. It's very cool. Would anyone like to call out their score, whether it's high and something's happened that's helped you get really in stride, or whether it's a lower score and you'd like to just check in with the team on, does anyone have any suggestions, or maybe just even share what's going on for you and get the benefit of the team's support? Sarah, I can see you put down your score there as a 4. How are you with that? Are you doing okay, or what would you put the 4 down to?
I think just the meaningfulness of where I'm at is not personal, and that's a huge thing for me. And so I'm just trying to figure out how to either to get it more personally meaningful, or if I need to change where I'm at altogether.
Okay.
So, and just kind of, I thought, wow, this class would be really good.
Well, the first thing, that's cool about what you've done is just to stop and reflect. Some people get so busy or get so sort of used to the rut of where they're at, they don't even stop and think about it. So the very fact that you've called it out, which with your ID, when you're a strong authenticator and you actually verbalize what's going on, because you make it real, it then almost compels you to do something about it. So just the fact that you articulate it is a really significant step forward. But in this deck, I'm not sure if you're here in our earlier class, but I'm just going to scoot through a couple of slides here and show you a slide that we had that you might want to refer to, because this slide here, I don't know if you can see it, Sarah, but on passion and purpose, if you go to your drive, which is the Strong Authenticate drive, and you talk about having more meaning and purpose in what you do, your need to help is really huge, but you've got to feel like the help matters, and is making a meaningful difference. And when you can get hands-on and feel like it needs you, it's not just that it needs anyone to help, but it actually needs what you bring to the table, and you can get personally involved in making that change or that difference. That's going to be huge for you. And the final thing I'd say, and then I'd just invite anyone else who's an authenticator to maybe share any nuances that I might have missed or not reflected as well as an authenticator I need, is you need a clear picture. And I got to tell you, it's probably one of the most, the point about helping and about having a clear picture, on my experience with authenticators, they're two really like highly weighted ingredients to you getting more meaning and purpose. So if you have a clear picture of what it is you're trying to achieve, and you feel like you're personally able to help make that picture become a reality, that's going to bring a lot of meaning and purpose and fulfillment, to what you're about.
I think that totally hits the nail on the head. And so the career I'm in, I got into because I got divorced. I knew I could do it. I had 4 kids to provide for. And I've killed it. I've done great. And it's been almost 15 years. Well, not quite that long, but I'm kind of feeling that my youngest is a senior, and I'm like, what do I want to do now? It's not just do or die anymore.
Right.
And maybe it's time to find some passion in that. So yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. So I just will take it one step further with something that just occurred to me. And this is for the benefit of the whole class. If we really want to help people, you've heard me just give some what I would call level 1 strategies to Sarah. So level 1 strategies are, say, things like you need a clear picture, you need to help, you need to be personally involved. The level 2 strategy is the strategy for the strategy. So how do you get a clear picture? And I got provoked by that, Leonie, by what you put in the chat, because when you put you need clear steps to get to the picture, I'm like, that's really cool that you put that. This is a great example of the masterclass that we need. There's some nuances to this. So you think about, okay, how do you create a clear picture? So as an example, Sarah, if you were to put like a vision board together, if you're sort of like feeling lost about how to build that picture, the concept of a vision board where you might go and get like some magazines or something and just cut out pictures that you find energizing, and you just put them on a board, and it starts to create a picture of, like when you talk to them, you might have a picture of, something outdoors or something physical or something social or whatever it might be. And when you talk to it, it might start to help create that picture that you have. Another way of doing that is to futurize the picture. Don't think about the picture for today, but think of it, 5 years from now, what would you like your life to look like? Then it maybe isn't as constrained by whatever the restraints are of today. So that's the level 2 strategy. And then level 3 could be, okay, let's talk about, now you've got that vision board, what do you do next? So just like we talk about level 4 questioning, I've often felt that I've left people a little hanging if I say to them, what you need to do is put a plan together. You know, you're a completer, you need a plan. You're an authenticator, you need a picture. What they still might need help with is, how do I put the plan together? You know, how do I build that picture? And you need to take it through to action. And that might get actually quite tactical, but it might be what the person needs to just get them sort of kick-started in making the pivot in their life. So thank you, Leonie, for that little sort of bit of guidance there. Sarah, anything else, any other questions you have about what we've just shared, or is this enough for now?
No, this is great. Thank you so much. I appreciate your input, and I would love to just kind of listen to what other people have to say now and kind of learn from the group. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Well, it's you said it's why you dialed in, and I'm glad you've already gotten some value from it. Would anyone add any nuances, other nuances for Sarah, particularly the authenticators on the call, if you can sort of pick up on anything else that if you're in Sarah's shoes, you might also need?
Yeah, Sarah, hi, it's Greg here. The sadness in your voice is strong, and I think that's great that you are owning that. Like, you come up on a call like this and put a 4, and it's like we jokingly say, if you're an 8, don't show up. If you're not an 8, don't show up. You know, it's like, except we're here when we're not. And so the fact that you've done that means this is very real for you. And I'm just wondering, if you got someone that you're talking to that you could have a real conversation, not a virtual one like this necessarily, and really explore what's missing. Because for me as an 8, I'm feeling what you're sounding like and what you're saying is, I feel useless, and it's like, why am I bothering and all that?
Yeah.
And yeah, and when I makes you feel useful and, well, what's missing? Sometimes I just need to go blah, 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 and vent and maybe have a cry, and then all of a sudden I go, well, what I want, and it spurts out, and that what I want is the thing I've been waiting for a while, or not acknowledging myself, and so it's like I've been pretending, and I guess all I want to say as an 8, I feel you, and I want to say, is anything you could do, get real as quickly as you can. Does that make any sense?
You. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
You know, I just love that when another person with the same ID or similar enough ID speaks, they just have a way of picking up on stuff and reflecting it with the, you know, just the words are different, and it can just land so differently. But more the point, you feel like someone really gets you. So good on you, Greg. I appreciate you making that observation and sharing it.
Can you hear me?
Hi, Tina.
Hi. I have something to share with her. Well, I'm on the opposite spectrum. Okay, so a few times ago I said that I'm starting to practice retirement. You've been filled with building your children's life and having all of that. I was totally consumed with work, and for many years. I'm on my 36th year. And so now going into retirement, it's like, okay, what am I doing with this time? Which is kind of like what you're experiencing, a transition. And what are you going to do with that? And can you do things that you wanted to do? And what are those things? And I'm a list girl. I still write out a list. And so the reason why I'm an 8 right now is because I'm forcing myself to do my list of practicing retirement. For instance, today I took a bike ride to the pickleball court in the morning and did that. Yesterday I, did rowing. I'm doing some things that I didn't used to have time to do, but it's hard to transition into actually doing them. But making the list and having it on my calendar helps me a lot.
That's great. I'm definitely a list girl too. So I appreciate that so much.
Sure.
Would anyone else like to comment on their score?
I will just share real quick. For those of you who are list girls, I would even more recommend to a client that they do either draw or make some kind of sculpture. I do a lot of vision board workshops, specifically for people who are most comfortable on the left hemisphere of their brain, because there's some information there on the right hemisphere of your brain that probably all of us don't tap into enough. And so I was totally on board with your idea of gathering images, putting them down, and then what we do, I use a process called process-oriented psychology, and we ask people to set an intention for making a vision board. Then we give them time to make the vision board with all kinds of mediums and drum music, which also shuts down the thinking side of your brain. And then after, it depends on how long I have, so 20 minutes, 3 hours, and they complain equally no matter how much time they have making art. And then we have them sit in front of it, which is also part of process-oriented psychology, and ask that piece of work, like, what are you here to tell me? And you would be amazed at the kind of information that comes out. Don't worry about punctuation. Don't worry about writing left to right or right to left or up and down, just like write and write and write for about 5 minutes. And then sit back and take a look at what it is. A lot of that outcome of that is to be private for you. We tell people not to, they're not allowed to comment on their own work. Nobody else is allowed to comment on their art, and to make those boundaries and just sit with it. And then about 2 or 3 months later, we ask them to go back and witness it again. And so then more and different sometimes comes out. So there's a lot of information inside of us that we just, as Greg said, you know, it's like be brave enough to just kind of go there and say, and, you know, like really, really, what do you want? Right. So good work.
Thank you, Ellen.
These are really, really good advice, and I really appreciate it. I definitely don't want to monopolize the time, so but wow, I definitely needed to join this call today, so thank you.
We all do. That's why we're here. But the really nice thing, Sarah, is it's not really just about you. I mean, because of what we're sharing, it's actually helping everybody better understand themselves and or get equipped to help other people, which is the whole point of why we're here. So you know, you're actually helping instigate a really valuable learning experience for everybody, even though it sort of has you at the center of it. It's actually, you know, spinning off to help everyone. So thank you for being your honest, vulnerable self. It's awesome. All right, let's dig into the topic today about careers. So I'm just going to very quickly refresh just to get everyone back sort of on the same page, what we covered last time, and then I'm going to dig into a few actual practical examples today. So if you remember last time, this was what we were talking about in the class, was, is there a connection between your ID and the types of ambitions and, you know, directions that people take with their lives? One of the slides I just showed you does show some alignment there, you know, as to where people might gravitate to, and therefore the different career choices and roles that might map to different IDs. And then depending on your ID, how do you actually use the insights and strategies at various inflection points? And we're talking about these sorts of things, you know, figuring out what career you want to have, how you go through the recruitment process, like the whole notion of job interview certainly suits certain IDs way better than others. Some people have a real advantage, meaning typically people who are a strong improviser, if they're confident and in stride. I mean, just because you're an improviser, if you're lacking confidence or you don't have a passion about what it is that you're doing, you're not going to necessarily come across so good in a job interview. So, you know, it's all about understanding whatever your ID is and then how to have it work to advantage in each of these situations. And then when you're onboarding, what type of person are you? Are you a person who's fast out of the gate, but you're also a fast burn? And so your real challenge might be staying motivated 3 and 6 months later. Or are you someone that takes a while to get familiar, get settled, feel like you know how everything fits together, and then eventually you come good? But it might mean that the first 3 or 6 months are not where you don't really want to be judged in that time because it's taking a while to get yourself all settled. And do the people around you know that in terms of how you're going into the role? We have many people say that in their resume, they now also include their ID chart. So it provokes the person interviewing goes, what's this? You know, and they go, well, that's the way I'm wired. Let me tell you about how I operate. And often the person on the receiving end, you know, the interviewer, finds it very cool that a person knows themselves so well and can be so articulate about how they need to work to be set up for success. So that's really important. Then there's the whole feedback area, how you do that so that it works and that people have a desire to want to support you with coaching and mentoring and so on around you. And then finally, as you progress your career and you, through success, you find yourself in roles that have more to do with leadership of people, even though what might have attracted you to that particular career direction was your love of, you know, tinkering with things, but then you find yourself in charge of people. And that's not really why I started this career. How do you then go about whether you're a fit or not a fit? You know, and I'm thinking as an example of someone that might start off in the sciences field or in engineering, and they're such a good engineer because they're wired to all the tinkering side. They now get promoted into ultimately positions of leadership and, to be honest, senior leadership positions that are all around being way more strategic, being a communicator, being a people person, having to develop people, recruit people. And they go, all this people side is not why I joined this career. I want to be an engineer, you know, and can you develop? And if so, how do you go about doing that so that you're true to yourself and still really effective? So that was what we was, you know, a lot of the slides and discussion we had last time. What we want to do this time is dig into some of the questions more specifically. Given that this is the masterclass, I want you to think about this, and let's have some discussion on this slide. So we want to talk about these three questions, like how fulfilling is your current role? And do you see a link between your role and your ID? And what I mean by that is you might say, like, I'm a verifier, and Paul, I know from my ID, I need to solve big, hairy problems. And right now, I'm not. I'm doing a really meaningless role. And that's why I feel like I'm a 4 or a 6 or whatever, you know, at times. There might even be that the bulk of your role is great, but there's a certain part that you can see that is not so fulfilling. Is it your best role yet? And if it's not, what do you need to help get it there? And if it is, what can you see that's lined up to help it be your best role? And just where do you get stuck? So we'd like to hear some of your thoughts around these things, anyone that would like to share. Then we want to dig into this piece here, which what I showed you last time was there is like a 3-legged stool to success in a role. You got to have the competency, you got to fit the culture, but actually 70% of people's success or failure has to do with their boss. And so let's dig into that around, you know, is that your experience? When you look back and people can say, oh, well, it's never the money. It's hardly ever the money. You know, it's often the culture fit, but maybe you can share some light on this. And well, let's see from our own little, if you like, from our own little research group here, what this shows for us. And then finally, there was just this, if you want to talk about your next, you know, where are you going to from here? What does it mean for you? And these are just to provoke some thoughts, but if there are some things you've got on your mind that you're contemplating about figuring out your next, or you've got something in mind and you want to check in with the group around what do you need to be set up for success, let's dig into that if we have enough time as well. So just to come back up to where to start today, let's just take a second, just think about how fulfilling is your current role. So this is a little bit like looking at our peak performance score before and saying, you know, how's life for you? And you go, oh, I'm an 8 or 9 or 10. But when you just bring it down to your role now, and you think about your role in general terms, is this really a role where you feel at a high score, like an 8, 9 or 10? And if so, what's making it that? And if it's not, what's missing for you? And just speak to the link of your ID. And then from facilitation point of view, I'll try and sort of bring it together so that whatever we each share, we can find a value for everybody. So let's see how we go. I can see some comments starting to pop up in the chat. So who would like to share first? Who's got something that they can see about their role they'd like to share in terms of the level of current fulfillment and the connection between your ID.
Hi, Paul. Can you hear me?
Always, Amanda, always.
Sorry, I'm just in the car because the office is really busy. But yeah, that's really timing for me, this discussion, because I have not been very happy at my role for a while now. I think since becoming a mother, realizing I don't have enough hours in the day, and I actually don't know what I like. And what I do know is I'm not in stride at work, and I think that is because I don't have enough time for all the tasks I have. So there's lots of interruptions, and I can't be on top of everything. I can't tick things off my to-do list every day, and that's just really frustrating. So it made me think, like, maybe it's not just about the right career, but it's the how you do your role. And if if you don't necessarily think, like I never grow up thinking, oh, I'm going to be a doctor, I really want to be an architect or whatever. I always just thought, I'm going to work. I like to work. I want to work in an office, whatever. But what I do, I think, is not as important as the how I do it. And at the moment, the how is not in line with my ID. So I think that's where the frustration comes from. And until I create space to operate in the way that works for me, I'm not going to really know what I like at work, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's me at the moment.
And just to set the context for the rest of the group, you're in your own business too, right? So it's not
Yes.
necessarily resigned from, like, you actually own the business. So I think that's
yes.
a great context for everyone else to understand, is just because you own it doesn't mean that makes you a 10. There's a lot of people go into their own business thinking, oh, I'll get freedom, I'll get autonomy, I can call the shots, like I will, that's my secret to success. And I know there are, many people in their own business, it's actually almost worse because they can't run away. You can't just like flick it and go somewhere else, and start afresh. So it's like a double challenge. But thank you for sharing.
Yeah, see why I'm not in the office. I'm in the car at the moment. I'll let every guys hear that. But yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to share a couple of things, and I'd invite feedback or questions from the rest of the group. A couple of things to keep in mind. So much of this comes down to your own perception. When you can say it's about how I'm doing, I'm not getting to do this, I'm not getting to do that. Could it be that you're also focusing on the 5% of what's not right rather than the 95% of what you are doing? Because that's going to haunt you forever. I mean, it's going to haunt you as a mum, it's going to haunt you as a wife, it's going to haunt you as a friend, and it's going to haunt you as a worker. It's just your instinct to focus on what's not working as opposed to everything that is. And it may well be that rather than trying to fix anything, if you just took a little bit of time each day, and it might even be that you do it just once a week or something, but you'll figure out the right rhythm, to step back and sort of go, what is working? And because your mind instinctively sees the 5%, and then that sort of becomes everything, it may well be that if you step back and you look at everything else that is actually getting ticked or that you are achieving, because the trouble for you is you get on a group like this and we all see you as a rock star. There's so much stuff that you do that to us is really working that you maybe don't see so automatically. So you can see it but you probably need to do it with more intention rather than assuming it's just going to be from a good feeling of fulfillment. And the second thing that compounds that is when you are an avoid improvise person, and so strongly as you are, you actually get your biggest fulfillment from struggle. Like when you've got to toil and struggle and work hard at something, that's fulfilling to an avoid improviser. And so it can sort of like hoodwink you though, because you can feel like, well, because I'm struggling, because it's hard work, because it's challenging, I'm not enjoying it. But actually, in that sweaty moment, like you're on your way to victory, you know. And if you got it too easy, you probably wouldn't enjoy it. But you got to take the time to step back and then appreciate the victory. I've worked, like, more than 90% of elite athletes are avoid improvise, and so many of them struggle to celebrate their personal best, their gold medals, their championships, because they just instinctively stay focused on what went wrong or what they could have done better, instead of, but you won the championship, you won gold, you know. It's like, yes, but it's no but, just stay in that moment of celebration and victory. So they're just a couple of things that occurred to me, that therefore it could be as simple as you're being very harsh on yourself. And if you took some time to just reframe your perspective on the whole picture, not just the part that's the struggle or the part that's not working, maybe you're actually doing really well, and it would give yourself a really lovely gift to see that.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. That's actually one thing I can't do often, is have that perspective, and I need it. And you know, yesterday I was having a really bad day in the office, and I went for lunch with Joel, my husband, and I'm like, this is going on and on and on. And he's being really patient and supportive. And he said, well, let's take a step back, hang on, like, this is working, you know. For example, I now have Monday mornings off with my son, which is something I've been wanting to do the whole year since I came back to work full time. Like, that's a big victory, you know, like, to be able to do that. And so he helps me see that. I just don't know what should I put in place to make sure before I get there, you know, like, that I have that perspective on my everyday, is that I need to take some time off, like you said, and have some purpose around, hang on a second, take a step back and really think about all the positive, because I do get, you know, onto that 5%, and I want to make everything so perfect and high standards, and yeah, it's really difficult for me to get out of that unless someone pulls me from it, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's as complicated as it might need to be. That's like me realizing 14 years ago, that if I really want to be consistent with my exercise, I need a personal trainer. I need someone to do it with me, you know. Pretending that I could build the personal discipline and accountability to be able to do it on my own, I wasn't going to get there. And I realized in any part of my life where I've got someone else I'm doing it with, I always do it. And so I've just signed off on having a personal trainer for the rest of my life, and I've never had a problem, you know, doing that. So if you realize now, look, you know what, I'm instinctively going to go to what's wrong. I need someone or some mechanism to help me stay focused on what's going well, whether that's Joel, whether that's taking time out on a Monday morning, not just to be with your son, but to, you know, to do some sort of almost like meditation around what's going well. But if you need a mechanism like that, or you need someone else to do it with, like, put that in place so that it just keeps pulling you back to that positive all the time. You've got a really intense drive that's going to keep you focused. It's what's going to make you, you know, the perfectionist, the excellence person, that you focus on getting that 1% all the time. But the price of the 1% is you focus on the 1%, you know, not the 90%.
Yeah.
That's good. So just have some mechanism or have some person that plays that role of getting you focused on the 99%. And it's not to hoodwink anything. It's to your point earlier, it's to give you perspective, but a more holistic perspective.
Yeah, and getting out of my own head, because as an avoid improvise, I think through things a lot and all by myself. And if I manage to speak to someone, it's almost like it's not as bad as everything that was going on inside my head. So yeah, no, that's a good idea. Thanks, Paul.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to share anything, either in response? Let's start in response to what Amanda was sharing before we move on to a separate topic.
Yeah, just briefly maybe. So one thing that really helped me in this ID drive is focusing on, like, when you're not happy, or like when Amanda said she doesn't know what she wants to do, right? it helped me to abstract a little bit. For example, in my ID profile, it's like, I need to rescue stuff or projects or people. Right? And I don't need to know what exactly I want to do, as long as it involves some notion of rescuing something or another. Right? It makes everything much more flexible. It doesn't have to be as concrete. And that, that's what I really found helpful there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Good on you, Jacob. So has that meant that you've been able to do the same, effectively doing the same role, but because you reframe it to be something that you can, to your point, be rescuing, that changes your level of fulfillment about it?
No, but it made me see why I'm so unsatisfied. I
Oh, okay.
moved away, right?
Okay.
I moved away from a role where rescuing was all I did into a great career step, like more money, more responsibility, everything, but it's now very abstract. I'm just
Right.
floating, and it's not fun at all, right? And I was not sure why that was. And that really helped me.
Awesome. Isn't it so cool to just know that about yourself? And like, because it resonates, you then could take action on it and sort it. That's awesome.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. Does anyone else have something that they could share about the link between their career, like whether it's fulfilling right now and the link you see with your ID, or not fulfilling and the link?
I think that the one thing that has made a difference to me in my career is that I understand what I bring to the table, and I'm not afraid to share that. When I started, you didn't have to be an engineer in my position, but the people now are all engineers. I don't know what they know, but I know how to help them come up with, I know what questions to ask. I know how to help them. And so when I see this imposter syndrome, I sort of understand that, but I don't fall into it, because I want to help them accomplish what we want to accomplish.
Okay. Thanks, Tina. Greg, I saw before you put down that you were a 10 in terms of how fulfilling your current role is. Can you maybe share why it's a 10 for you and what's the link that you see with your ID?
Sorry, did you say Greg?
I did.
Oh, I didn't remember putting a 10. I thought I put a 9.6. I know Tristan put a 10. It's all right. Actually, it'd be nice to hear from Tristan's 10. Greg talks enough. Are you willing to put you on the spot, Tristan?
Oh, always, always. That's what I do my best, isn't it? I am a 10 because it's interesting. It's even just attending these meetings and kind of reflecting on it that I don't have time. I don't do often. It's the overwhelmingness of it and the promise of something bigger, and that's even more exciting. Even though I find myself overwhelmed often, I also find that that's like I'm in stride when that's happening, and that kind of realization of that this morning was kind of like, actually I am doing great. I am doing really well. I'm just haven't taken a second to think about it. But I often find myself with way too many things to do, which I like, but I can always see that there's something bigger on, that I will get to, and it's not more than that, other than, come to that realization that I would actually be, sometimes I can find myself frantic, and that's not what I would call in stride. But once I understand that much of it's my own making, thanks Paul, then I can deal with it better. I hold myself to higher standards and sometimes that can get a bit overwhelming. But I also like the variability and the challenge and that comes with that.
It's interesting to hear you use those words, because if we didn't know about ID and you heard
Yeah.
someone talking about feeling overwhelmed, it's a little
Yeah.
bit like using the word anxiety, for example. You know, the natural reaction is something's wrong, and we need to change that for you. You know, and in actual fact, it's one of the ingredients that's helping someone be really in stride. It was what got me started on this concept of level 4 questioning, because I'd hear people say certain things and I wanted to react like just to the first thing they said, and I was like, hang on a sec, just wait a sec, there might be more context, and I'd dig a bit deeper, and then I'd find a completely different meaning to where we started with, you know, something like overwhelm. And it was just really interesting to me as I went further down that little sort of spiral of questioning, understanding, I'd actually find, yeah, not only a different meaning, but often the opposite of where I would have first reacted to. And I would just encourage everyone to sort of practice that, not just to figure out IDs, but just because there can be a big gap between the first thing someone says, like, you know, how was your weekend? Yeah, it was great. And you go, oh, really? What happened? Well, it wasn't so great, you know, and then they go into the detail of it and you get a completely different answer to what it started with, you know. So I think it's cool that you share that, and I'm pleased for you, Tristan. I know how much you've had on your plate, that you're feeling so in stride and fulfilled at the moment. That's awesome.
Hey, Paul, can I just tip into that, what you just said? Because it's good for all of us to remember that when other people are speaking, we don't really know what they mean by each word they use. And I almost literally mean each word they use, because when you do the questioning on any one of the words, you find out their version of what they meant by that. Like you say, life's great now. And when before someone said, oh, I don't feel personal, we don't know what personal means to that person. We know what it means to us. So we tend to ask a question on what it means to us. And then we get an answer. We go, oh, well, I guess I'm wrong. But if we just wonder, I wonder what they mean, I wonder what they mean, I wonder what they mean, and let them keep exploring it, they're going to hear themselves in a different perspective that, you know, we almost don't say anything. And just by saying, really, never? And all of a sudden they go, well, not never. And I think the level 4 is just it's a great down green version of just keep asking until they hear themselves. It's really never about us, but just my rule is I don't know what they mean by that. I don't know where they're going, and that keeps me questioning. That's all.
Yeah, excellent, Greg. Thank you. All right, is there maybe one more before we move on to the next topic? Someone who would like to share about their career or their role right now and the link they see with their ID, in or out of stride?
Hi, Paul. This is Brad. I was actually typing out in chat, trying to do like a written response to this because I can't usually speak off the cuff, but it actually helped. So I guess I would say at the moment, my current role fulfillment would be a 7. And I attended this session because I was, interested to see what others are talking about in this space, and also to try to link my idea a bit more to why that's the case. It is the best role I've ever had, but it is also declining these days as opposed to feeling like it's stable or getting better. And so, I'm starting to get antsy, I guess, and thinking about whether or not I should move on to something else. So in terms of how to link it to my ID, I've been thinking through. I am a 7.5/7.2, and so right now I think one of my areas where I'm stuck is because of the strong use complete and the avoid improvise in me. I'm struggling in an environment where I haven't always been able to finish most of the work that I've been tasked with over the last 5 years, which drives someone like me crazy, of course. There's a lot of just waste, right? You can have multi-month programs and projects that just get tossed, when they're almost done. So that kind of stuff can weigh on me. I'm also not always being leveraged as I'd expect to be. So I thrive in environments where I'm used to, consulting on problems, creating simple solutions from complex challenges. And lately, there have been situations where I've noticed that people that I need to work with or get buy-in from, usually people more senior than me, but I tend to have to corral a lot of directors in my role. Not all of them will always leverage me as I would expect to be leveraged, or sometimes even try to maybe get around me or avoid me. And that's either on them because they're trying to avoid accountability, or it is just because they are trying to avoid me in some reason or another. But this is despite the fact that at the moment I'm getting all positive feedback. I ask for feedback often from my manager and others. I'm being showered with praise. I'm being given raises. I'm being given lots of bonuses. So no issues anywhere in that regard. And yet sometimes I can tell sometimes that I'm not in the room when I should be, which makes me wonder if I'm not being seen the way I thought I was being seen. And then you combine all that with the fact that I've been in the same work for 5 years. So maybe this is all just a symptom of I'm getting bored with it and I need to, look for the next challenge. And you know how it is when you're in a place long enough, you start seeing the same conversations come back full circle. And they're talking about solving something we solved 5 years ago. And you're wondering, okay, why are we having this conversation again? So I guess that's me. But these questions have been helpful, and hearing people talk about it on the call has been helpful as I've tried to structure out, okay, what is it about my ID that might be giving me friction right now with the current situation?
I'm just sitting here thinking, wow. I mean, you started by saying, I was typing this out because I can't really do it off the cuff so well. Well, I just need you to know you need to no longer think about yourself as not doing things well off the cuff, because that was such a frigging articulate description of what's going on for you. You could have read that. I mean, that was just so well done, Brad. I want to give you that feedback straight away. That was awesome.
Thank you. Maybe that's from years of being put on the spot a lot in calls with lots of people. You have to pretend like you came prepared, right?
Well, I say it to you so you don't have to own anymore the fact that you're not, that you can't do something off the cuff, because you just did. It's like someone who says, I don't have any friends, and you go, you don't have any friends? And they go, well, there's one person I'm struggling with, So just be careful of what you say to yourself, because it can be limiting. But in what you shared, firstly, it was a beautiful example of the fit between your ID. Like, there's so many things, like clearly you've come to know yourself very well in the ID language. It was just really cool to hear you share it in the way it applies to your role. It was also great to hear that, even though you're getting lots of praise, lots of positive feedback, getting raises and bonuses, which are all big boxes to tick that most people aspire to, there's still a lack of fulfillment. And it's got more to do with elements of your ID needs that are missing. Like, I feel like we're starting lots of things but not finishing them, for example, So I think that's good to hear, that just because you get a lot of things lining up, if other key needs are not being met, it won't necessarily make you a 10 out of 10. So you expressed it all really, really well. And there's a lot, I felt there's a lot I could share to, each of the things that you raise. And I will share a couple of things with you in a minute, but I firstly would just invite the group to give any reaction that they want to give to what you just shared as well, because there might be other people that have a similar, were sort of reacting similarly to me, or, different, but have a reaction just to what you shared. And I want to open that up first.
Hi, Brad. I was just gonna share that very similar to me. If I start a project that I can't finish, or that people decide later on it's not important, let's not finish, that is very frustrating. And so I can imagine how being in the same company for 5 years and seeing that happening over and over again, that would be a big reason for you. If not just, if that was the only reason, I would believe you, because for your type of ID, that would be very frustrating. And you also mentioned something about not having complex problems to solve or challenges. And I wonder if you're telling your managers there and telling them that you need that you want other challenges or other responsibilities. Because sometimes, being a strong avoid improvise, you might not be really speaking out loud what do you feel, and what are some of your wishes. And if they're giving you all this bonus and you're performing really well, I'm sure they would be open to hear how you might want the job to be different and to satisfy some of your needs. And I think what you mentioned as well about when they come back to the same problem that we fixed years ago, that's because things are always changing, and that might always be a need for improvement. But with your ID, we kind of look at things in a way of, we've perfected this and let's move on. Let's not go back to it, because otherwise, that's not right. Let's just do something, do it well, and move on. And so I wonder if there is a need, the company has a need to reveal something that you've already perfected, and that's kind of maybe insulting to you in a way. But yeah, I would encourage, speaking from, I guess, a employer perspective, I'd encourage you to maybe be open about coming up with some strategies. It sounds like you're quite aware of what is bothering you, which is really great. And sounds like you've been thinking about this a lot. So yeah, that's my comments for now.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. It's scary how close your ID is to mine. But yeah, I appreciate the insight. Yeah, and I guess I would. Those are good thoughts. I think I'm more than busy, and I have complex challenges to work on. But I think in a way, they're boring to me. They're the kinds of challenges that are maybe more bureaucratic in nature, as opposed to the challenges that I would see myself being more useful on, and yet maybe not being pulled into the room for those. The good news is I've had great conversations with my manager, who's fully aware and fully on board with what I've been saying. And ironically, I think these days my manager is feeling kind of similar to how I am, so we might be in a similar boat, unfortunately. And there has been discussion about changing my role a certain way, but my manager's been overridden a little bit, not being allowed to shape it that direction, or at least we've tried, but just haven't been able to yet. And fully in agreement on the idea that we should be reviewing things that are done and looking for improvements. No issue there. I think in my case, the ones that are coming up that kind of make me laugh are ones where solutions were offered 4 or 5 years ago and rejected, and then you're there long enough, and eventually someone asks for it again. Like, hey, why don't we do this? And you don't want to bring up the fact that you brought it up to them 4 years ago and they said no. But I don't expect people to have perfect memory. I don't either. I just have really good notes, right?
So Brad, in the interest of time, I'm going to make a couple of recommendations to you. Firstly, I suggest you connect with Vicky on it. You can see Vicky on our screen here, Vicky Sakalis. She is very involved with the organization you belong to, and we're going to be doing some work together anyway. And so whilst things might have been in a bit of a rut, there's every chance that things might get a chance to change. So it might be good for you guys to have a conversation. And you may, over the next few months, maybe you can help drive some of those changes. In terms of two things you said that I said earlier I'd react to for you. One was your point about not being seen. And that's a really important point. And it's true for a lot of avoid improvise people, that they feel, they do all this work, they have all this value, but it isn't necessarily something that bubbles up and is visible to other people, not just their bosses, but it could be their peers, their family, not as visible. And I guess it comes from a place of you thinking, well, I don't want to make a big deal about it. I don't want to create a song and dance or a big noise. I just want to do the work and have the work speak for itself. The challenge is that the work doesn't always speak for itself. And it's not because it's not valuable, but it's often because other people are so busy, immersed in their own stuff, they're not looking up to see or notice the work that you've done. And so it would be really valuable to find a way for you to convey that value. And it could be as simple, like we were talking before with Amanda, of taking some time out to articulate the positives so you keep a more holistic context. Just even articulating for you what have you achieved, and here's the important nuance. what was the strategic value of what you achieved? Like, why did it matter to the strategic priorities or the direction or the value of the business? Like, why did it matter? And just calling those things out and sharing them so it becomes more obvious. Expecting that people will notice it is a real furphy, you know, or like it's a myth. People are just too consumed, and especially if it's to do with leadership, they're just too consumed, and they really come from a place of, I can just speak for myself. I would say, oh, well, I don't even know what my people do or if they put in extra effort, because I just work from a place of total trust. You know, in the same way I don't have a camera watching what people do and checking all sorts of things about work hours, productivity, anything like that. It also means I don't have a lens on the value of what they do unless it somehow gets pointed out to me. Sometimes that comes from other people saying, oh, did you know so-and-so did this? But often it comes from them just sharing emails. And some of my Avoid Improvise people, actually talking about Vicky again, does a really good job of this, where she'll just copy emails to me saying, hey, Paul, thought you'd like to know this. And it might be about some connection or communication she's been having with the client, but it keeps me aware of the value that that person is then bringing to, you know, their role, to the relationships of customers and so on. So being a little more intentional on that might be a really smart thing to do. And the second thing is expectations. You know, there's nothing more frustrating to a completer than feeling like you don't get to tick the things off and finish them. But typically your timeline to get things finished might be, let's say it was going to take a year to do something. In the environment you work in, it's quarterly cycles. So if you could recalibrate a lot of the asks, even though they sound like they're going to take longer, what can you do in 3 months? Because that's when it's likely to change next. So if this was just to be done in 3 months, what could you do? And maybe reset expectations of those shorter timeframes. It's more in line with the leadership culture that you're working within. And you might then find that because you set about doing something that's got a shorter window to it, you are able to feel a greater sense of achievement than starting off on something that was a request that invariably was going to take a longer period of time, and then they changed tack after 3 months. You could have actually anticipated that, is what I'm saying to you.
Yep, I appreciate that. And Vicky and I are already messaging each other.
And
So,
no doubt that was happening. Guys,
appreciate it.
this is a topic we could talk about for hours around careers, and I'm sure we will dial back into this from different angles around careers and so on in the coming webinars. But thank you for joining us today. Thank you for those of you that shared, whether it was your questions or your scenarios and the comments that came from those of you on the call, you know, giving advice and just empathy was really valuable. So thank you for being here. I hope it's helped all of you. Have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you next month. Take care, everybody.